Okay, we are diving straight into the deep end today because this is the mystery that's just been hanging over everything for months, and it's a question that really demands an answer. Where is Tiffany Stratton?
Yeah, it's one of those questions that, I mean, on the surface, it seems so simple, but when you really look at the timing of it all, it gets complicated.
Right.
You have a major star who was, until very recently, the women's champion. I mean, a central figure in that whole division. And she has been completely gone from WWE television since, what, November 2025?
That's a huge chunk of time.
A huge shoot of time, especially, leading into the biggest booking period of the whole year.
Exactly. And for anyone following along, the last time we saw her, she was losing that championship to Jade Cargill at Saturday night's main event.
Yeah.
And that felt so final.
Oh, it was the final note. It was the definitive end of Tiffy Time as champion, and it wrapped up what felt like this just never-ending series of matches with Cargill.
It really did. So our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear. We're going to use the specialized reporting you shared to cut through all the noise, all the initial speculation that was flying around.
And we're going to find the true, legit reason for her time off. And just as important, we're going to analyze how creative used her exit to, build up the new champion.
Let's start right at the beginning, because the second she was gone, that vacuum was it was immediately filled with theories. When a big star vanishes with no explanation, the wrestling media machine just goes into overdrive.
It really does.
Yeah.
And the earliest speculation was pretty logical. You had some people suggesting that because she'd been such a workhorse champion, constantly traveling, defending the title everywhere, that she was just taking some well-deserved time off,
Yeah.
to recover from that schedule. It's pretty common, especially after you drop a big title.
But the length of it is what killed that theory, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
If it was just a vacation, it wouldn't be 2+ months, especially when you're building to the Royal Rumble.
Exactly. That led to a much more specific theory, one that got a lot of traction, but ultimately turned out to be wrong.
Right, and this is the one that really needed debunking.
Absolutely. This one was put forward by sources like Dave Shear of PW Insider, and the theory was purely about creative. The idea was that Triple H had intentionally decided to just pull her from TV, give the character a total rest.
The idea being you bring her back fresh, right? Maybe a surprise return at the Royal Rumble itself or just before it.
That was the thinking. And on paper, it sounds logical, conserve the character, but that specific theory was very quickly and very firmly smacked down.
Yeah, the reporting that came out later called it absolutely wrong.
And it wasn't just a rebuttal, it was a critique of the business strategy itself. The logic was, why would you keep a star of Tiffany Stratton's caliber, someone you've invested so heavily in, for almost a year off television for 2 full months?
Especially during the most important creative cycle of the year.
It's a huge loss of momentum. For her, for the company, for ticket sales, for the narrative. You have the Royal Rumble right around the corner, which kicks off WrestleMania season. Every single week counts.
You just don't pull a top talent like that without a really compelling reason. Either an in-story reason or, a physical necessity.
Exactly. A 2-week reset,
Yeah.
maybe. A month to cool off a program, sure. But 2 months of just silence for a major champion suggests something else is going on.
And that's what drove the real investigation. If creative didn't want her off TV, then it had to be something physical. And that brings us to the source that finally gave us some clarity.
Yeah, we turned to Dave Meltzer and his Observer newsletter.
And Meltzer was the one who cut through the smoke. But what's so fascinating is how he did it.
It's the brevity of the report. It was delivered as like a one-liner, just a single, simple sentence that stated the core fact. Tiffany Stratton is off TV because of a legitimate injury. And that was it.
That's it. A one-liner is what passes for clarity here. It's amazing how one sentence can clear everything up and yet tell us almost nothing at the same time.
It really is. And that lack of detail is actually a detail in itself. If you look at what was missing from that report, it's everything.
Right. No severity, no type of injury, no clue when it happened. Was she working through it before? We don't know.
No recovery timeline, nothing. Just the fact of the injury.
But that secrecy, the fact that the whole thing was so hush-hush, that actually leads to a pretty optimistic interpretation, which is probably good for fans to hear.
It does, because look, if this were some devastating long-term injury, the news would have leaked instantly. The major surgeries in wrestling, they usually happen in one place,
Birmingham, Alabama.
in Birmingham, with those specific doctors.
Mm-hmm.
If she had to fly to Birmingham for a major knee or shoulder operation, that kind of information is just too big to contain. It always leaks.
Because that signals a 6 to 9 month absence, and creative has to pivot immediately. Since that didn't happen, the hope is that it's something minor.
The most likely scenario is she was dealing with something nagging. A strain, maybe a partial tear, something she could work with, but not forever.
So the thinking is she knew she was going to drop the title at Saturday night's main event.
Right. The plan would be we drop the belt, and then you immediately take the time off you need to heal and rehab properly, get back to 100%.
And if that's the case, the timeline puts her back perfectly for Mania season. Maybe for WrestleMania 42 in the spring of 2026.
Exactly.
Okay, so absence explained. A legitimate, probably minor injury. That makes sense. But now we have to pivot to the creative side of this, and this is where the real deep dive is. How do they handle the title change itself? And why this incredibly dominant, one-sided match to end the feud?
That's where the high wire act comes in. We're moving from the physical reality to the deliberate booking strategy. WWE's decisions in that match weren't just about ending a feud, they were about launching the next one. It was all about maximizing the impact of Jade Cargill.
And when you watch that match back, I mean, the intention is just so clear. This was a planned squash match.
Yeah.
It was, 6 minutes? And completely one-sided.
The sources are very clear that the layout was meticulous. It was designed to send a message, to make it very, very clear that this was not the same Jade Cargill that Tiffany had beaten before. This was a whole new level, a monster.
But wait, a squash match against your top champion? That can be so damaging. How do you do that without just burying Tiffany Stratton's credibility for good? That's the part I find so tricky.
And that's the genius of it. There were two main goals for that 6-minute squash. Goal number 1, protect Tiffany Stratton.
Okay.
The sources all emphasize that she was already selling a storyline knee injury leading into that final match.
So the fictional injury lines up perfectly with the real one.
Exactly. So by hammering home that storyline injury, the loss is immediately protected. It frames Tiffany as this, baby-faced fighting champion.
Right? She showed courage just by competing.
Immense courage. Defending the title, even though she's not 100% taking this awful beating, the audience has an excuse built right in for her defeat. She wasn't beaten fairly, she was compromised.
So she's not a failure, she's a hero who finally just succumbed to the odds.
Precisely. Which brings us to goal number 2. Establish the new champion. The goal was, without a doubt, to establish Jade Cargill as the next big thing, an unstoppable force, a monster heel that nobody can compete with on an even playing field.
And for that kind of story, you need a quick, decisive win over a huge name. And Tiffany was the perfect person for that.
The heel turn just before the title change was crucial too. It signaled that new intensity, that aggression. It justified why she was suddenly capable of this level of devastation.
So Tiffany gets the excuse, she was hurt, and Jade gets elevated into this terrifying new role. That is effective storytelling.
It is, but it only really works if the audience accepts that the loss was necessary.
And that brings us to the history of the feud itself. Because by the time they got to Saturday night's main event, that title change felt strategically inevitable.
It was a feud that really struggled to find its footing after that first match. Remember, Tiffany beat Jade clean at SummerSlam, which was a massive win for her.
Right. Then they had that no contest on SmackDown, which just told you, okay, this isn't over.
And then came the low point, that triple threat match with Nia Jax.
Oh, man. The reporting on that match was just brutal.
Brutal is putting it lightly. The sources called it one of the worst matches in WWE in 2025, regardless of gender.
Wow.
And when you have a failure on that level in a major feud, it creates a huge problem. The pressure on the final definitive match becomes immense. You have to wash that bad taste out of everyone's mouth.
The audience needs something clean, powerful, and decisive to sort of reset the narrative and justify the whole thing.
That's the strategic necessity. In that context, WWE really had no other choice but to finally pull the trigger. They had to put the championship on Jade Cargill in that fourth and final match. Any other outcome would have been a disaster.
I can totally see why. If Jade had come up short a fourth time, after all the investment, all the hype about her being the next big thing, all that effort would have been completely wasted.
Absolutely squandered. You cannot build a star as a monster and then have them fail 4 times against the same opponent. It just doesn't work. They needed the payoff that the heel turn was building towards.
So the title change delivered the story. It secured the monster push for Jade, and it let Tiffany leave with her credibility totally intact because of the injury angle.
It really was a case of every piece fitting together perfectly.
So if you're trying to make sense of all this, you basically have two storylines running at the same time that explain everything.
That's a great way to put it. First, you have the physical reality. Her time off is due to a legitimate, probably minor injury. She's not just resting, she's actively healing.
Okay, and second, the creative reality. The loss was a carefully planned narrative device. It was built to do two things at once. It protected Tiffany by giving her that heroic injury excuse.
Yeah. While at the same time creating the most dominant, unstoppable monster heel they could in Jade Cargill.
It's pretty masterful when you break it down like that.
It is, and now, looking ahead, the focus just shifts completely to the future. We know she's injured, but the anticipation for her return is just going to build and build. What does 2026 have in store for her?
Does she come back for revenge against the monster she helps create? Or does the time away lead to a whole new character? It's honestly a really exciting prospect for fans.
It really is.
Absolutely. And as you're mulling all this over, here's the final thought. The real creative challenge this whole situation highlights. Think about how difficult this is for a promoter. How do you simultaneously protect a departing star like Tiffany, giving her a heroic reason for the loss, while using that exact same moment to establish the next dominant force like Jade Cargill, all without hurting either one of them long term?
It's a razor's edge.
It's a total high-wire act. And according to the sources we've looked at today, they absolutely nailed it. Something to think about until Tiffy Time finally returns.